Evening, everybody, and Happy New Year. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore, and we have with us today Allison Montclair, aka Alan Gordon. And the brand new book is called Fire Must Burn. I guess I should do it on that side. And we were just talking about what a nice job the Severn House is doing with these covers. Very cool. Alan has signed a bunch of these for us, and so if you'd like one of the signed copies, I'll put a link in the comments field. And if you have any questions, go ahead and send them in, and Barbara will bring me back towards the end of the hour, and I'd be happy to ask any of your questions. So, Barbara, over to you.
Thank you very much. Alan, what a pleasure to see you. I mean, we've outed you as Allison, but we've done this before, right? So here we are. So I've known Alan forever
Yes.
because I was a huge fan. I have remained a fan of Fess the Fool, which was a marvelous character where we first met. And you wrote how many books in that series, Alan?
That was 8 books and 4 short stories.
Okay. So that was medieval and lots of fun and Shakespeare infused and all of that. But Alan has a distinctive voice, literary and funny and what's the word I want? Sly? I could say sly, couldn't I? Would that be fair?
I've been known to be sly.
Well, anyway, so he is now writing in this series set in post-war London. Actually, just World War II is ending, and we are up to, let me think, where are we in 1947 now? And we have two women
Yeah, still in
who've been
47 on this one.
right affected by the war and now coping with the peace. And they have very different histories during the war. So why don't you remind us? Because this is a book that particularly draws on Iris's experience in what the SAS. Would that be fair?
It's never been pinned down. She has special operations training. Her current boss is probably more MI5 at the moment, but was definitely dealing with more overseas operations during the war. But Iris went to Cambridge University in the 30s and was recruited for special services because of her general brilliance and the fact that she was fluent with the languages. But then she breaks her ankle in parachute training, never goes over. So carries a lot of survivor guilt because a lot of her friends did go over and never came back. And then Gwen Bainbridge is from the aristocracy and married extremely well right before the war, and then her husband was killed in the Battle of Monte Cassino in 1944. So she's a relatively young war widow with a 6-year-old or 7-year-old boy, I think he is by the time of this book.
Mhm.
And the two of them meet each other at a wedding where it turns out they both had something to do with setting up the bride and groom together. And they decided that they have a knack for this sort of thing, so they started a licensed marriage bureau with the idea that after the war, what people need is to be brought together. And for each of them, it's also a way of healing from their own particular wartime traumas, and they become great friends. But unfortunately, these murders keep happening around them that they get dragged into solving, and
Well,
that's why
both
we
of
have
them
a
are
series.
grieving in different ways. I mean,
And in
Iris,
this particular book, this is, yeah, definitely. And that's been actually a large part of what I've liked to do in terms of writing the series. It's about the mysteries, but it's also about their process in terms of trying to recover from the war and how they help each other and the friendship between them. So that to me is the strength of what I like to write about. And in this particular book, it does stem from Iris's wartime experience. Even though she's no longer working for the Secret Service, he never really stopped working for them. And her wartime boss is recruiting her to do a job for him, which involves the marriage bureau, strangely enough. But there is somebody coming back from working for the Foreign Service in the Far East who's coming back to work for the Home Office, the Foreign Office in London. And he's suspected of being a possible communist spy. This is right at the World War II ended, the Cold War began. So there was a lot of people involved on both sides. And so she's recruited specifically because of her friendship with this guy from Cambridge to see if the Right Sort Marriage Bureau can set him up with a possible marriage candidate who's actually going to be one of the brigadier's agents who's going to try and vet him and winnow out whether or not he's working for the Soviets or the Chinese or whoever. And thereby hangs the tale.
Well, yeah, no, it's the Red Scare time. And of course, Cambridge, we all know, supplied quite a few spy stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that was kind of the inspiration when I first began the series, and I knew it was going to be post-war. There were several topics I knew I wanted to get to, and one of them was the story of what they were called the Cambridge Four. It turned out there were 5 of them.
Right.
And I didn't know what I was going to do with them exactly. But I did have Iris go to Cambridge specifically so that when I got around to some story that was somehow going to be inspired by them, it was going to give her a connection to it. And I ended up not using the story of the actual Cambridge 4 or 5 because they actually weren't revealed until the 50s and on. I think the last one they didn't really publicize until I think the 70s. I think it was Anthony Blunt or somebody like that. So, but I wanted to have something that was going to start in Cambridge because it would just seem to be a plausible setting for it all.
Absolutely true. And I was thinking about that. How much damage? I mean, this is off topic for your book, but looking back, how much damage did they actually do? I mean, they pretty much blew up their own lives, but
yeah, but they also it's never been known exactly how many agents were outed by, or were double crossed by them to the Soviets in particular. There were a lot of people who were just vanished after coming into contact with them. So they did some real damage.
Yeah, no, I know on an individual basis they did, but I don't know if they particularly altered the course of history.
History happened. We don't know.
Yeah, that's true. Hard to say. Well, anyway, so Gwen was so stricken with grief when her husband died and all that her in-laws, who were not altogether a wonderful bunch, put her into what would we call it? It's not an insane asylum, but they did.
I call it a sanatorium, but
okay, all right.
Yeah, Gwen in the early books is actually under the jurisdiction of what was still called the Court of Lunacy,
right,
in England back then. It was called that until 1948. So she finally gets her status restored in book 5.
Right.
So we're up to this is book 8, I guess. Yeah, book 8.
Mm-hmm. So
she's back to, and she's got control of her money. She's got her son back in her life. She's finally moved out, has her own place. And, she has her life, not back in order, but she's in a new phase where she has more control over her life. And she's a little bit able to assist Iris independently than she was before.
Right. Well, her son is still the heir, but she now is free to have a lover who is somewhat unexpected. And we met him. He was a friend of Iris's, but now he's part of Gwen's life. And he's a really interesting character that allows you to explore some of the theatrical side of post-war London, which is the subject that really interests you.
Yeah, there are a number of subjects. I always like having theater involved. I'm a theater guy.
Right.
I try and write theater, and it's another thing I don't make much money at, but I'm still writing it. And Sally, who was a friend of Iris's at Cambridge and was aspiring to be a playwright, is a very fun character. I think I have him based partially on Stephen Fry, the British actor, just because he's a large person. And, I have that voice, Fry's wonderful voice going in my head when I write Sally's dialogue. But Sally is also someone who had been undercover during the war himself and is capable of extreme physical prowess, if necessary, on behalf of Gwen and Iris. Not that he's a savior, but he's somebody who's their friend and occasionally is called on to be, as he calls them, their odd job boy.
Right. I mean, he's somewhat of an, unlikely partner for Gwen, but all that she's been through probably makes it work out. Plus, her relatives really can't control her choices anymore. even though
Yeah, and she's also been, cut out from her own social circles because she had been a lunatic
right.
legally for several years. So she's not exactly, her reputation among the aristocracy ain't what it was. But we're also in post-World War II, so social strictures are changing quite a bit anyway, which is one of the things that I like to look at. Just everything is different now.
Everything is different. I mean, I've read all of Jackie Winsper's Maisie Dobbs series, and there are some parallels here. I think of Iris sometimes. Ashley Weaver has written a very good series about a woman who has an odd background but was an agent during the war. I think
Hmm.
it's a fascinating topic to think about the roles of women in the war.
Yeah.
Um, and now we're moving on. There's been just a glut of wartime, women's stories. There's been just an astronomical number of them published. So I'm really glad to see us moving on from actually in the war to post-war and people having to pick up their piece, the pieces of their lives. But also there are more employment
Yeah.
opportunities for women, more, if you remember Harriet Vane in the first Peter Wimsey, Harriet Vane
Oh,
of
sure.
that quartet. And remember there's I can't think of her name, but the spinster who runs the typing bureau.
Yeah, the one who was on the jury in the first
Yeah,
book,
but
I
I mean,
think,
and
was the
so
whole.
that is Sayers showing that women were able to earn a living with typing skills and, some clerical skills.
Yeah,
But those are 1930s, I think. So, they're pretty,
20s.
or maybe the
Pretty,
20s,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So this is kind of an extension. And, I got my Stanford University alumni magazine the other day, and every month there
Hmm.
is an ad by some woman who runs what effectively is the marriage bureau, but, in a modern techno sense of connecting people. And I think about the fact, that people are always talking about getting on Hinge or, all these different dating apps and the whole bit. And that's actually what the right sort was, before.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not. I mean, I think some people might raise their eyebrows and think, what do you mean marriage bureau? But the truth is, they're all around us at the moment. They're all dating
yeah.
apps of one sort.
And marriage bureaus did exist in London back then, so it's based on historical
Sure.
truth.
There must have been some in the US as well.
That I'm sure of. I don't know enough about U.S. marriage bureaus to comment on that. I'm sure there were.
I'm just postulating that if there were some in London, there were probably some in the United
Yeah,
States.
they popped up in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which was set in the late 50s and early 60s. So I'm sure that was based on some truth.
Well, I mean, lives were just as disrupted, in America as they were, well,
Oh,
maybe
sure.
just as, but disrupted by the war and relationships were broken and people were left widows or, or widowers or whatever.
Well,
Um,
what the war did in terms of social structures was twofold. One is that people who were, otherwise would have lived in the same part of the Great Britain and stayed there because of the war were moving to different places, either because they were in training or because they were
right,
being called upon for different types of service and factory work. So that was going on. And then, of course, women were moving into uh, all sorts of professions that they otherwise wouldn't have been in had the war not happened, because they were coming out to move, again, work in factories, do all sorts of men's jobs. But what also happened after the war was, with the demobilization of the services, there were a lot of women who then went back to being housewives, or whether they wanted to or not. I mean, there were enough of them who didn't want to go back to that life, who found that, well, I could do this other thing.
right.
But they were not always, the servicemen had the first priority for getting the jobs back, even if women were already in them. That was going on. And the women were not getting paid at the same level as the men. I've run across, there were actual committees looking at that in Parliament, looking at that very aspect of the working professions. Should we pay women the same as men for the same job? And they came to, after months and months and months of looking at the question, to say, no, they shouldn't. But there were, again, women coming out. They always see the example of the young chemist named Margaret Thatcher, coming out, right after the war, and as a chemist, which was her first job, and then gradually working her way into political jobs. So things changed. It just took it didn't happen overnight, but it was
No, it
happening.
didn't. And, there were women, widows with children. What about childcare? There were people,
Hmm.
swaths of London that, were destroyed in the war where people didn't necessarily have housing. I mean, there were all
Yeah,
kinds of problems facing women in the workforce that,
yeah,
had to be resolved. So you've dealt with that pretty well because Gwen um, was able to live with her in-laws regardless of how, they treated her.
yes. Gwen was
And
lucky. Gwen was rich, and she married rich.
yeah, and Iris, is a survivor. But when we left Iris before this book, in the last book, she had suffered a terrible loss, and she had
Yes.
the person that she loved and thought she might have a future with is killed in a criminal action. I mean, he was always sort of flirting on the edge of criminality anyway, but still. So Iris is really just, Gwen is sort of settled at this point, but Iris is not. And so this job comes along at a moment when Iris is kind of, everything's up in the air for her.
Yeah, it catches her, in part at an emotional low point. Her wartime experience with the brigadier during the intelligence, led to some very difficult experiences for her too. So she's not really, she's not coming out of it as a happy person with him, but she's also sort of under his thumb because basically certain aspects of her life that he could hold over her in terms of her violating things like the Official Secrets Act.
Right.
So she, and actually Gwen is as well at the beginning of this book, under his thumb, he's given them basically a choice that's no choice at all, which is to, help him out with this particular scheme. So he's looming sort of Damocles over the whole thing. And as this particular plot develops and goes horribly wrong, the question becomes whether they keep on doing what he wants them to do or whether, they rise up and figure out a way to do their own thing instead, and how to, dance through that without putting themselves in jail or into whatever secret facility British Secret Service would have been using back then.
Well, you've used different, genres of crime fiction for these different stories. This one's your spy story.
Yeah, a little bit.
I love
It's a little
the
bit, that's a little bit of going into the past. I'm going back to sort of Iris's, not quite her origin story, but going, you see a young Iris in there, which was much fun to write the university flashbacks and see what she was like then. So you can see how she was that person then and what happened to cause her to become, what parts of that informed her experience now. And I had a lot of fun doing that, and it was interesting doing that research for that period of Cambridge in the 30s.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is a fascinating, but truly, I think here we are again in the 1930s. So, it's kind of frightening to think that it's rolled around again in so many different ways, or it's rolling
Yeah,
around again. I mean, here we go, the world order being upset and a move back towards, authoritarianism and, extremists in
yeah.
politics. And well, anyway, but assuming that you don't plan to make this a series of spy novels, I'm sure they're going to come up with a way to do more traditional investigation without,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I didn't want every book to be like the first one in terms
right.
of, somebody comes into the marriage bureau with a problem they have to address,
Yeah,
and it's all going to be related through that. The marriage bureau is going to be the central location and, often the focus. I mean, it's, in part the focus in this book because it's being used for this particular plot. But every book, to me, I want to have a different feel, a different rhythm, a different problem in terms of what was going on in the world. It might be a very microcosmic one, it might be very, large one involving British society in some aspect of it. And, it keeps it fresh for me to write that way, and I hope to read as well.
Well,
He
you
keeps,
succeed,
I want the readers to be, I don't want them to say, oh, it's another one of these.
right?
I want them to be caught off guard a little bit.
I think you've succeeded very well at that, but you've also solved a problem, which is, how do two women who are not actually in professional law enforcement, how do they keep running into these kinds of situations? And the answer is
Yeah.
because of all these people who flow through now this one, the guy is sort of, directed into the marriage bureau, but in other cases, they show up as clients. And so you've got a
Yes.
constant feed of, people with problems because of the nature
It's a
of the
good venue.
bureau. Yeah. And I mean, two women in London, which is a huge city after all, wouldn't normally be exposed to the variety of people and crimes that so far has populated the series. In the second one, you actually relate to the British royal family.
Yes.
And I don't know if you noticed, and I don't remember if it's because it was an anniversary of a death or what, but the woman who's the focus of that book has been on Instagram quite a lot lately. And
Oh,
so
really?
yeah, and I mean, I do the Instagram feed for the bookstore, so that's the only reason I notice it. I don't have any personal social media because I don't want to go there. But the kind of mainspring of that plot, being her, is much more well known now as a consequence of this among some people than it was. It was a complete surprise to me. I mean, I had no idea. So I love the fact that you were able to take her personal history and make it, a part of it. So anyway, Iris and Gwen have had some contact with the palace, and
Yes. And
they
will
have
again.
that.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
never know. You never know what's going to happen.
no, you don't, which is so much fun. But anyway, here we are, and what we have is this gentleman. His name is Danforth, right? Anthony.
Yes. Anthony
Um,
Danforth, Tony. Yeah.
and he has been where in Singapore or somewhere in the Shanghai, somewhere in the east.
Well, he's been a few places, as we learn his background. He was in Cambridge where he became radicalized, as did Iris. That's how they knew each other. And he ends up going with other like-minded Brits to join the International Brigade in the Spanish Civil War first,
Okay.
which is part of his background. It's not a direct part of the book. And then survives it, but is embittered and decides to leave London, goes off to Singapore to teach, and then gets into the foreign service there, and then gets caught up in the British war effort out there during the war.
Yeah, well, he's caught up in the War of Japan, which,
Yeah.
is a bit different than the experience so many of the people in England had because they're much more focused on the European theater.
Yeah.
So Anthony,
So he's got a background in different,
yeah, and now
he's
the
got a
question
background
is,
in Asian languages and had quite a bit of experience there.
yeah. But so the question is, has he come back as a communist agent or a communist spy or whatever, or is he just back because his life in Singapore was not sustainable?
And that's what they have to find out.
Right. Now, why is it that he is available or to the marriage bureau? I mean, why is it that he's
Well,
willing to
that's
do
another good question, which is part of the story. I don't want to give away too much on that,
that? Okay.
but he is recruitable. There's a certain amount of pressure in the Foreign Service to have, the full package of wife and family, because you're
Right.
presented socially. So it's like the opening of Pride and Prejudice. It needs to find it needs to be supply has to have a wife, and Iris being first of all a friend of his, and second of all running a marriage bureau is an ideal person to recruit him. But the plan is that they're going to place him with a woman who is in fact a member of the British Secret Service, who's going to again winnow him out.
But he
She was
doesn't
another
know
fun
that.
character to
No,
write.
I mean, he doesn't have any idea that's what's going on there behind his back. And so you develop
No,
all
if he did, it would be, well, if he knew, then it would be, it wouldn't be a very good plan, would it?
no, no, not at all. So you do an
Yeah.
amazing, I think, you've got a wonderful British voice, a British idiom. You obviously really love doing the research. What is it about, Britain, the British that attracts you so much?
Um, I think it was part, it's a complicated thing. That I think that among, the fact that they were so closer to everything that was going on during the war than we were. I mean, God knows we had a huge amount of people going over there. But still, those of us, the people in the United States who stayed behind, it was not like you were going to get blitzed. It's not like the V2s were going to land in your neighborhood, so they had a tremendous amount more disruption during the war, and they had a much higher percentage of their young men and women involved in the fight who were lost in it. And just a lot more contact with other cultures than the United States has. We're here. Our idea is another culture as we go to Florida. It's in England you go to you can just go across the channel and there's another language happening not that far away, and you go a little further, there's another language happening, another culture, another history. The times I've traveled there, I'm always amazed about how many languages everybody speaks there.
Yeah.
I have at this point, I can read French, I speak it very badly. I can almost read a little Spanish, and that's it. And everybody there speaks, easily 4 languages if they've done any kind of traveling around. So just all of that history going back much further than ours around you all the time, and all those other cultures around you all the time, it's just a very different experience. So I don't know if I envy it or if I just find it fascinating. The things about it I dislike, the class structure, of course, being very different than ours. I hope it's very different than ours. So there's a lot of things that just fascinate me about it. And I think it's just fun to bury myself in that other world, in that other culture, and to learn about it and to see what I can do to make stories happen in it, as opposed to say, I live in New York City, which we got a lot going on too, and I've written some things set here in other works, but it's just fun to learn more about that. I think I'm broadening my own horizons by traveling to that period and that time. So I'm expanding my own brain, as opposed to just about writing what's around me all the time now.
Well, you are a lawyer, and so you definitely got research skills, and
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
yeah.
I had research skills from college, so that's one thing I always felt was one of the most valuable things I learned how to do in college, was to learn, if I didn't know something, how to find it, how to learn about it. And it's fun just diving into every rabbit hole that pops up. That's why I write so slowly, because I'm getting distracted. I will look up the origin of a word phrase, or an origin of or what's going on in a particular neighborhood, or a particular. I've learned a lot about things like British fashion design, and what beers were being made locally.
Yeah.
Anything like that. What neighborhoods were being torn down, what railways were being constructed, what things were changing during this period. Everything is grist for the mill and constant writing prompts. You don't know what's going to suggest something, and all of a sudden your brain say, "Hey, that would be fun to play with." So all of that is good.
You say that you're a slow writer, but you've produced one of these books essentially every year. So I don't.
Yeah.
That's not being a slow writer. I mean, lots of people.
Yeah. I guess I run into people who say, "Oh yeah, I've written 40 books." And I go, "Okay, that's a lot." And then you run into someone, "Yeah, I've written 80 books." Okay, and at a certain point, you think about the famous line, I think it was Truman Capote, was when he said, "That's not writing, that's typing." But there are people who just seem to be able to generate a lot more words per day than I do. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Part of it may depend on if it's a contemporary story, or they're not. You're learning about another culture, you're learning about history, you're doing all those things, writing these books, and other people are just sort of like making shit up, as they go along. So I've never thought of you as a slow writer. That's an interesting analysis on your part, but I would say that you've been very productive.
I'll try. I try.
Yeah, no, you
I have
definitely.
my current deadline. Fortunately, Severin has renewed the series again.
Oh, good.
So I'm good through book 11. I've turned in, this was book 8. I turned in book 9 in October.
Okay.
So I'm working on book 10 now. But I got the word that, I had started researching it, hoping they were going to give me a renewal. And I got the word from my agent that they were going to. And he says, yeah, and they would like the next one on April 27th. And I went, what?
Yeah.
I'm writing faster, this one. That's for sure.
It's
I've written a book that fast once before, so I mean, I'm not too worried about it. And I'm a full-time writer now, so I'm not a lawyer anymore. So that should speed up the process.
Well, I'm delighted to know. I mean, at some point, I think in anybody writing a series, at some point you have to ask yourself, how fresh can you keep it for how long? But
Yeah.
11 books is, that's actually a pretty lengthy series.
Oh, I'm quite happy with that. Yeah. And if it stops being fun for me to write,
Yeah.
that's when I know it's time to stop. So I still enjoy the process, the learning process, the living inside the heads of the characters, what strange situations, what humor will come out of it when I can find a good way to get in organically. I feel like, in one sense, book 10, there's one pun I threw in a pun. I'm not proud of this, but I did it. I felt like, wow, I really designed the whole plot just so I could throw in this one pun towards the end. So we'll see if it plays or not. And
Okay.
I mean,
But
there's a
you're
mystery
only,
too, but the pun is good.
but you're
So
only
we'll
in
see.
1947, and England did not go off food rationing until 1953. I don't
No,
think that, it was able to. When did Churchill die? Was it 52, 53, something along those lines? Or was it later?
later than that, I don't remember. I
I
have to I
can't
have to
quite
think about when he
remember.
dies. I have to remember this. I have to remember the third season of The Crown. I guess it was mid-50s. She was already queen. I honestly 58, but I don't know. Somebody can look that up.
Well, I mean, you could be writing towards Elizabeth, being queen. I mean, you know,
I'm still in 1948 at the
I
moment,
know you've
so
got a way to go,
yeah. I'm looking. I
so
mean, the next big event, not in this book, but maybe the next one is I got the Olympics coming in to London in 1948, which was on my list of topics.
that would be
So I'll see what
fascinating.
happens on that.
Sure. I had forgotten that, I mean, because I was actually alive then. I had forgotten that London, despite all the wounds of the war and so forth, actually did host that Olympics. Wow.
Yeah, they were supposed to I think it was scheduled in 1940. They were
Right.
supposed to hold them, and then it didn't happen for obvious reasons. So when it was resumed, they held them, and I think they were like, it was like the austerity Olympics. They didn't build any new stadiums or any new things like that. They used all existing facilities they had. So the old Wembley and the old whichever stadiums they had that were in existence
Yeah,
were, like one
right.
size. They did one stadium that had every event. They didn't have like separate track and field, separate soccer, separate
Right.
whatever.
But I just find it, I'm thinking back, I find it fascinating that the Olympic Committee picked London. Wonderful.
Well, they weren't going to pick Berlin again.
No, no, definitely. Was that 36? Was that, it was.
36 was Berlin, yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. Right. And then there wasn't one in 40. And there wasn't one in
40 and
43.
44 were during wartime, so
Yeah,
48 was the
so
next
those
one.
were right. I keep wondering what's actually going to happen in Los Angeles in 2028. I just have trouble believing that it's going to go as well. Paris went so smoothly and so brilliantly. And
Yeah, well,
I had
I'm
a,
quite happy that New York didn't get it,
yeah,
because it was
well,
just going to be a mess.
exactly. But I did the book launch for Jeffrey Archer for his last book sometime earlier this year or last year, now that we're in 2026. And the book was about the 2012 London Olympics. And it was about the
Hmm.
security threats. And there were, I hope I have this number, either 22 or 23 threats to the games in the book. And all but a very small number of them were real. He talked to the
Hmm.
people who'd been responsible. And, you know, none of us watching it, all, we remember what Daniel Craig and the Queen, and
Yeah.
that, that really, and you don't see all that. And so you have to wonder, as the world's getting more violent and all, how easy it will be to stage an Olympics that won't be just rocked by. I thought the French managed it really well.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not so confident that we will.
We'll see.
Yeah, we will see.
I
Yeah,
mean,
definitely so.
yeah.
So you
Yeah.
can, the Olympics will provide material for the next book
For
or
yeah,
two books.
the one after I'm writing down, I think there's one other thing I could get to you beforehand. I have to do the research, So my pitch to Severin for book 11, the Olympics, it's like a 2-line pitch, and then this will happen, But I always say, unless I think of something else or something better, So
Right.
anything I pitch, my mind may change, or my research might say, well, you were going to go this way, but how about this way? And you never know. You never know. I don't, if I feel my brain's telling me to do something, I usually follow it. Yeah, because I at this point I trust it to to lead me in the right direction. I know it sounds like it's a separate entity. It may be. I don't question the process at this point anymore. I just say,
Well,
okay, we go where you want to go.
you've written for the theater for years, you've been a lawyer for years,
Hmm.
so you certainly
Yep.
have a skill set that allows you to, have a good time writing these books. When did you start? I'm trying to remember. 13th Night and Fist the Fool. When was that?
That came out in 1999.
Okay.
And it was my second actual completed book. The first was, I still call it my practice novel. It will never be seen by anyone, and I would be embarrassed to be seen. Everybody's got at least one of those. I remember talking to, somebody had asked, I forget which conference recently. I think it might have been the last Malice Domestic, but I was talking to Katrina McPherson, who's a wonderful writer. And somebody had talked about, on a panel she was on, I wrote this book and I wrote this other book and they still haven't been published. And she's just saying, well, just keep writing. But I said to her afterwards, just how many books did you write before you got one published? And I think she said it was her fourth, and I've got 4 books I've never had published. I think every author's got a few in their trunk or wherever one, whatever electronic trunk one has now. It's all, not everything works, and you learn from your mistakes.
Sure. No,
I
absolutely
was thinking,
true.
there's,
Sorry, I was
yeah,
just going to
so
say that you'd had enough professional experience by the time you started writing that,
I had, well, the legal writing where it helped me, when I was young, when I was a teenager. I mean, so one of my idols as a teenager was Tom Stoppard, the playwright, who just passed away. Wrote one play after another. The play in particular, that it says, my God, you can write like this. I had no idea, was Travesties, which was, if you've never ever get a chance to read Travesties or see a production, it's just mind blowing. And I was 15, and it made me. He and a couple other people were the ones who made me want to be a writer. But then he had this wonderful, florid play with the language, which I wanted to duplicate, and I just was not capable of it, But I tried, and it was, of course, when you try and do that without the ability, it's disastrous. And then I went to law school, where you do not write florid wordplay. You have to really write precisely. Everybody talks about law being about obfuscation, but it's not. It's about, using the word to mean exactly what it says, so that you cannot wriggle out of it afterwards, if you're doing it right. So that had an opposite effect on my writing, which was very helpful. And so I was trying to be much more precise when I started writing for myself again. And then once I got more comfortable with it, I was able to find sort of a happy medium and become whatever it is I am now. So I could play with language, but only when I knew what I was doing,
Sure.
But otherwise I want to make it, I always think of the Humpty Dumpty and Allison. When I use a word, used to mean exactly what I think it is, and nothing more, nothing less. So that I try and do that with language, and then if you can get a chance to play with things, you can, but it should not become, for me, the point of playing with it. Apart from the one pun that's coming up in book 10. Look forward to that one. Book 9.
Right,
Yeah.
but I
So,
always think of you.
but it's a pun that's justified by the book. So it's not just,
You don't have to
it's not
keep
just a free
using
pun.
it, Alan, for heaven's sake. But I do always think of you as your language. Uh, there's precision in the way that
Yeah.
you use it, and use it properly, but not stultifyingly. And it's one reason
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
enjoy your prose as much as I do.
Thank you.
So, Patrick, come and join us and see if we have any questions or comments from the audience. Um, I will say that if you are a reader of Dorothy Sayers, Jacqueline Winspear, even Carrie Greenwood, these books are just wonderful. And this one and the one before are still in print. I'm not sure the earlier ones at this point haven't migrated into that $28 print on demand kind of wasteland that exists there. But
Not quite that. Yeah. I think paperbacks for some of them. They're definitely all ebook available. But
right.
I like holding a
mean,
book in my hands.
I think starting at the beginning is ideal, but maybe at some point your new publisher will wrest away the books from your old publisher, and then we'll have them all, because they are in that they are doing that, and I think it's terrific. Patrick, what do you have to say?
We'll see what happens.
Oh, well, not a whole lot. Let's see here. Yeah, there are a couple of comments. Judy says, Alan, I hope that you will allow poor Iris to be happy at some point, because her lost love keeps showing up and it breaks my heart.
It takes time. She's in therapy. We'll see.
Let's see. And then Christine on YouTube, she says, I was wondering how you're going to make up for killing off Archie. I'm still upset.
I know. I knew that storyline with Archie was going to end one of two ways. And I think, from the very beginning, from the moment he became a character, I thought, oh, I may have to get to that point with Archie. And I did. But it felt like it was necessary for the series to move on that way. I think if they had ended up getting married, for example, it would have restricted things too much. Not that the marriage was the restriction, but the fact that he was in the underworld like that would have tied her down in terms of plot lines, and in terms of her own development too. It was not a healthy relationship in the long run. But she's working on things. We'll see what happens.
That's about it for questions or comments.
Right. Anything else you'd like to say, Alan?
And I would like to say,
Yeah.
I think that this particular book, Fire Must Burn, not to toot my own horn, although that's we have to publicize, but for me, I think this is the best one I've written in this particular series, and maybe the best thing I've written since there was a book in the Jester series, An Antic Disposition, which I think was the best thing I've had published. But I really feel, when you are writing a book and then it's going through the editing process and you find yourself, you have to reread it multiple times. And every time I had to reread this book, I thought, that feels good. I felt very proud of the writing I did. I felt I really was touching on the emotional core of the two characters, particularly Iris. And you don't have to have read the rest of the books to read any one of them, but I think this one is a particularly good one. So if you haven't read me before, or read Allison before, I really would recommend this one. So, and if you want to read the rest of the series, that's fine too.
Well, no, I think reading the rest of the series is a super treat. But you're right. I mean, a couple of the other books have been much more about Gwen and her trauma and her family situation. And now with Archie's death, and even before, now we're looking at Iris. If you have two characters, you do have to explore both of them. and you can't just focus on one of them all the time. So Iris is the more difficult character,
Right.
I think, despite the fact that Gwen had this quote, the breakdown and the lunacy thing. I don't think that Gwen has had the trauma that Iris has had. So, I'm glad you're exploring.
Yeah, in terms of the personal conflicts and everything like that. Yeah. Yeah, Gwen has to sort of grow out of her trauma while Iris has to confront hers more
Yeah.
and see if she can change more. So for Gwen, it's a growth thing. For Iris, it's a change.
Well,
And
and
change
Gwen
can
is,
be more difficult.
yeah, Gwen is cushioned by money. And,
She is
anybody,
definitely cushioned by money.
yeah, anybody who's ever really had to struggle without it. I've had a couple of periods in my life when, when it really shapes your whole life, what's going on with your life, your whole worldview, survival.
Sure.
So Gwen hasn't really had to do that despite the lunacy thing. She's always been padded, and Iris has
Yeah.
not. And it's interesting
Which
that,
Iris will call her out on occasionally.
yeah, but Iris doesn't really resent her for it, which I think says a lot about Iris, that she's able to work with Gwen without hating her for that. Good for her. Anyway, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you again.
Every now and then something will pop up.
Yep. We still have copies. We have paperbacks of the last book, which I really recommend, and we have access to some of the earlier ones. So we started out with The Right Sort of Man, and then A Royal Affair, which I touched on, which I really enjoyed. The Haunting of the Deaths, The Rose Company, The Unkept Woman. The Lady from Burma was actually a very cool plot, I thought. Murder at the White Palace, and An Excellent Thing in a Woman, which was the last book, and now we have Fire Must Burn. So, treats for you. Anyway, Alan, thank you so much. Happy New Year.
Thank you again. Thank you, Patrick. I appreciate all the support you've given me.
Well, it's our pleasure, and I
Happy New Year, everybody.
look forward to talking to you with Book 9.
Take care. Good night.